Great. And hello, my name is Laura Victoria Ward, and I'm here in a shared space with Kappel LeRoy Clarke. And I am going to go live on Facebook now. And hopefully that works. And if not, we'll see. It takes a minute for it to start doing it, but let's just start talking. So I just want to give a little intro. In the beginning of the pandemic, I started to do a couple of live shared spaces with people that I found to be really inspiring and to ask how they were making their way through the pandemic. So I talked to Mary Abrams and Liz Koch, and Mary Abrams is a continuum person, and Liz Koch, I learned about continuum through her. So they're really internal practices. And now I know that you and I have been sort of following each other on Instagram and seeing each other's things, having worked together at Equinox many years ago. Well, not so many years ago, but yeah. And so you have been a super duper inspiring person to me, and you are just incredibly creative. So what keeps you alive and going? Like what are your inspirations?
I'm sure that my answer would probably mirror yours in some way, shape, or form, but I think at the expense of sounding cliche, I think it really has to do with finding your passion, and as you know, when you tap into that, it just never really ends. For one, there's always an opportunity to learn, and because work, when there's passion in the mix, it never really seems like work. Whereas as many clients I've had throughout the years, some of them, maybe have grown accustomed to certain lifestyles that their jobs have afforded them, but the job is still very toxic. And sometimes how we spend our time is to help them to deal with that, because they've grown accustomed to a lifestyle, whether it's house or houses and all of the fruits of the labor, but maybe they're still very miserable in their job. I've never had that. And I've been in my field over 30 years, and I've never had that. There might have been situations that I needed to move because if I didn't move or take certain steps, that would have allowed some toxicity into the equation. And I'm grateful that I had the wisdom to take those steps, because what it ended up doing was it allowed me to continue to grow and feed that passion, and not fall into the trap of, well, there's security in this situation, but at the expense of your passion, at the expense of your joy, your peace, your growth opportunities. And so that's, to answer your question, is a big part of why I'm able to, after all this time, still enjoy it, have fun, be creative, is because I really do love what I do. I love being of service to people. I love helping people stay balanced and strong mentally and physically. And there are just so many ways to go about it. Even now, I'm still exploring, still experimenting. I'm still using myself as a guinea pig to ask and answer difficult questions. And it's just part of the process for me.
Yeah. So I just want to give a little bit of background. If you don't know Kappel, he is a trainer. He developed a whole bunch of systems, FREFLODO. I know you had those little cone things that you were working on, but FREFLODO, I just need to describe really quickly. It's basically, the launch pad is basically a, what is it called? A
modified treadmill.
A modified treadmill. Thank you. Yeah. A modified treadmill that has nothing to hold on to. So it's just a treadmill that goes around. And he developed this system of, it wasn't just get on the treadmill and walk. It was get on the treadmill and play like ping pong with another person, or get on the treadmill and like dodge lightsabers, or get on the treadmill and do like rolling. And I have to say, like, it was such a delight for me to learn this system with Kappel. And he was so generous with his time and energy that I got to participate with that for a while when Equinox was kind of slow, rolling it out a little bit. They just had 2 launch pads, or did they get 3 eventually?
It was, but you're right. It was slow. It was too slow.
Yeah, it was slow, and it was sort of unsupported. And I have to say, it's the most genius system that I have encountered in that fitness world, because it really met so many needs. Like it meets the need of working with balance. It met the need of novelty. You don't know what's going to happen. Like it was almost like dancing with somebody and not knowing what was going to come up. Working with you, oh, balls. We were throwing balls back and forth. So I'd be on the treadmill doing things, and I'd either be dodging something or throwing a ball or hitting like a racket ball while all this stuff is happening. And I felt like I was in the Matrix. Like, I'm like, I am Neo. I have to do things to adjust to what's going on. And so it really built spontaneity and fitness in the moment, aliveness in the moment. It was such a joy to do that work. So just to throw that little bit of background. And also you have done a lot of boxing, and right. Do you want to just tell us a little bit more about your background?
Sure. Would you like me to talk about it? First off, I'm excited just to see you lighten up. You're describing it like you just did it this morning. But that speaks to also you know what I mean? The truth of the matter is you could lead 10 people to something and get 10 completely different responses. Long before I developed FREFLODO, I would say, which was a very key turning point for me in not only my growth as a professional, but also solidifying my own training philosophy apart from whatever I had been taught or certifications or workshops, and, you know, learning other people's principles, reading it was really my own exploratory process that led me to the development of this, and then sharing with people, constantly tweaking it and all that stuff. Right. So that was clearly a turning point. But yeah, you're right. I did dabble in some boxing prior to that, and I grew up studying martial arts, and there was a point early in my career when I was at New York Health and Racquet Club. That was before going to Equinox in '95. So I was already doing it for about 3 years or so before I got to Equinox, in the field for about 3 years before I got to Equinox. And during that time, I had joined a boxing gym run by the Olajide family, good friend of mine. His brother is Michael Olajide Jr. I'm sure you know Mike, you know, so, I joined the gym because they were offering kickboxing, and worked with a guy. And although we were doing some good work, what really kept catching my eyes was just the boxes, just straight up the boxes, you know, the movement, the dance, right? The dance of it. And although I was a boxing fan coming from a martial arts background, for a very brief moment, I looked at boxing as almost like a limited combat art, because it didn't involve the legs. I grew up using arms and legs, so you're just using your hands. So in my mind, dare I say, I made some assumptions, right? And I say that because that just shows how young I was in my thinking and all of that at that time. But soon after, the kickboxing instructor left, and I still had time on my membership, and the guys who I had already started becoming friends with, they're like, well, give boxing a try, give it a try. And I was like, all right. And then tried it and fell in love with it, because in martial arts, I had grown up studying karate, right? Which was not the art form that inspired me to even take up martial arts, because I fell in love with Bruce Lee, everything he was about, his movement, his passion, his intensity. That's really what led me on that path. And although what I was studying was different from what he was demonstrating in most of his films, I still fell in love with what I was learning. I had some really grounded, inspiring, conventional teachers, right? Because today you could take a kid to a martial arts dojo, and, you know, half the times these instructors are appealing to the parents because they just want, you know, you keep signing the kid up. It's different. I'm not saying there aren't still good ones out there, but I do thank God that I had those who did not veer from the tradition of martial arts. And they were always talking about this. As a matter of fact, like if you got in a fight, or the sensei heard that you were involved in a fight, you get kicked out of the school. You know, their feeling is you're learning something that should be respected. And if you feel that you reach a point that you want to start testing what you can do, you can test it right here with the other senseis, right? So of course, at 8 years old, 9 years old, 12 years, nobody in their right mind wants to be getting their ass whipped by sensei. So that was pretty much it. But what they were really teaching was that when you really do master this, the last thing you would be thinking of is taking what you've learned and demolishing somebody who does not have the skill sets that you have. What have you really proven then? You know, needless to say, you've also offended the honor of the school and everything that they're teaching, because they weren't about that. You know, defend yourself, yes, but you know, they really frowned upon any kind of bullying. I remember there was actually a bully at one time, and word got out what he was doing, and including the bullied, everybody paid for it, and it wasn't pretty. You know what I mean? So, yeah, but so that had a very, very huge influence, not only on my personal growth, but influencing how I approach the work that I do as a trainer, as a coach.
And what was your family like? Because like you're one of the most, I think, really ethical people that I know in that fitness world. Like I feel like there's like you are really your heart, your guts, your head, it's all together. Like you're the whole package and highly creative. So what was your background like? Where did you come from that like how did you
anybody familiar with West Indian parents kind of knows how that goes. My parents are from Trinidad and Grenada. You know, I had there was definitely discipline growing up, you know what I mean? There was love there, but there was also an understanding, and that understanding was taught very early. Respect, first and foremost, for yourself, for your parents, and honor. You know, quick little story. I remember one time in school, academically, I was always pretty strong, but my favorite subject was math, at least until it got to college. But my favorite subject was math. And when I was in fourth grade, there was a group of us that the teacher called Math Sharks, because we would finish our schoolwork and our homework while still in class. So to keep us from, you know, being disruptive and just chatting with ourselves, because we would literally race each other to finish our problems. So when we were done, the teacher had us like erasing the boards and all that stuff, because we had literally finished classwork and homework for the night, because it was just a competition for us. So we used to compete. But I remember one night at that same time, my mother used to check my homework every night, you know, call me over, and she was holding up my homework, and she's like, well, what is this? And I'm looking at it and I'm like, I know I checked it. I know it's all right. You know, what's wrong with it? And she says, does this look neat to you? And my answer, wrong answer, was, but it's all correct. I did it. Everything is correct. So in my mind, I'm thinking, so what's the problem? I wouldn't dare say that to her, because you don't do that where I'm from. So she was giving me an opportunity to just say for myself, okay, I'll do it over and I'll do it right. But I guess I was being a little bit boisterous that day and challenging the authority. And she asked me about 3 times, you know, do you think that this is acceptable? Your name is on this. Do you think that this reflects who you are? This looks sloppy to me. In other words, it was like long division, but it wasn't like clean and straight. Like they kind of, you know, it waved a little bit. You know, it wasn't to the standard that she was raising me to uphold. So clearly I wasn't giving her the answer she wanted. So she ripped it, dropped it on there. So now I had to do it over. So I'm upset. Of course I did it correctly and all that stuff. And I remember being annoyed that, you know, she made me do all of this work all over again. But I go to school. Maybe within the week, it was really soon after, the teacher had held up my work in front of the class and uses as an example, telling the class, when you turn in your work, this is what it needs to look like. And she walked up and down the aisle so that everybody could see the homework that I only did over because my mother made me do it over, right? So that was part of the buy-in along the way, where she held me to a high standard, even when I was resisting that high standard, but it became a part of me and my approach. And going forward, I just won't accept anything less than the best from myself. And then for those who entrust me with their health and their fitness or athletic performance, I hold them to a similar standard.
Wow. My dad, when I was in third and fourth grade, I was also very good at math. But that's because my dad spent time with me doing math, and we did math together. There was a series called IPI that somehow he got his hands on, and he was really into mathematics. He was into agriculture and economics. And he would sit at night and spend the time with us doing all this mathematic work. And if we did it well, he would take us somewhere, or he'd give us money, like he would reward us somehow. So it was like, oh, this is great. So when I was in school, I was usually very high in math. But then the school didn't want to take us higher than what the grade was, or like one grade higher. They wouldn't skip us ahead. And so I actually had the wrong learning in school, which was like, they're not rewarding you for working hard. So just like I went backwards because I was never being challenged anymore after a while. And the same thing happened to me with the German language, because I had studied German. I lived in Germany for like a summer, like a few weeks in the summer. I came back pretty fluent. They wouldn't put me to another level. So like I learned.
How old were you at the time?
Well, when I was the math was third and fourth grade, like third, fourth, fifth, sixth, like those were the times. And by the time it was over, not that I'm not good at math, I'm okay, but I could have been really good if I had been.
They failed to keep you on that trajectory.
Yeah. And then the same thing. And with the German, when I came, that was in high school, 9th to 10th grade. And my dad used to say, don't take the things necessarily that you're super interested in. Take the good teachers. And there was a very, very good German teacher. So, and then the year that I went into German, she left. So I ended up with this other German teacher who just didn't have the foresight. And then because I knew my language pretty well, because I'd been living there for several weeks, but I was living with a family that only spoke to me in German. So I came in, I was really landed. And she wouldn't call on me either because I knew the answer. So I had this really bad situation happen twice through in school of learning how to not learn and not be pushed, and like how the school system wasn't taking me up, but keeping me down. So then like with my family and me, I often then just didn't take things very seriously. I mean, I did fine. I wasn't failing out or anything like that, but I was like, well, I don't really have to try and I can do fine. But if I do try, I don't get rewarded for my effort. So my energies ended up going in other places.
Okay. Yeah. That's unfortunate. You hear that a lot. There's a lot of gifted students out there who are actually acting out in class, not because they're just purely disruptive. They're just bored. They're sponges, and they are processing things actually in some cases quicker than their peers. And the teachers are the ones who aren't trained to deal with that student, So it's sad because there are a lot of kids who slip through the cracks that way, who never get to really nurture their gifts and really, evolve into their full potential. Yeah.
Well, it's fun. I mean, I ended up very much in movement.
You did though.
I mean, it wasn't like, it's okay, this is what happened. I'm glad I'm not like a mathematician. But also they say that kids that roughhouse with their dads, the girls, they used to say, I don't know if this holds true or how it holds up now, but girls who've roughhoused with their dads are usually better at math. Well, because you're
math
also
specifically.
At math, because it does something juggling your brain. No, something I think about the movement in your body, just your brain develops differently. And and if we're still a lot, like it's not the same type of development. Like a lot happens when we're moving. Anyway, that was old research. So
right on.
But let's go back and
I think the original question was what led to FREFLODO, and that was
the family background.
The family background, and then the boxing, right? So I joined that boxing gym. It was called Kingsway. They're no longer there, but it was Kingsway Boxing. So shout out to the Olajide family. While I had been an athlete all of my life up until that point, so this is going back, I was in my early 20s at the time of this story. And, the kickboxing instructor left. So now I have some time left for membership. The guys convinced me, try the boxing. So I tried it and fell in love with it. I fell in love with the chess of boxing. I fell in love with, okay, we're not just throwing punches, where we have tools. There's a jab, there's a right, there's a hook, there's an uppercut, there's slipping, there's bobbing and weaving, there's footwork. All of these are various tools that you use to set up the situation that will allow you to be successful on offense as well as be effective on defense, right? That showed, I learned so much more in a short period of time in that boxing gym, in all honesty, as far as combat is concerned, than I did probably in years of studying the style of martial arts. Although I learned a lot from them, but what I learned about in that sense, in a more practical sense, was very different. And it was also a lot more fluid. I found karate to be very linear. And much like some of the martial arts that Bruce Lee studied and mastered that inspired me to even take up martial arts, boxing was more similar because there was circular movements to it, right down from circling your opponent to how you throw your punches, how you move your body. It was very, very fluid. That really spoke to me. It woke something up in me that I didn't even know was there. And, but as much as it was waking me up, and as much as I had grown up being an athlete and very much in tune with my body, when it came to sparring, it always felt like I was a half a beat behind where I needed to be, offensively and defensively, right? Now, and it had to do with my movement. And that was one of the things that I did not get in the martial arts that I had trained. There wasn't a lot of emphasis on footwork, right? So knowing me and how our relationship started around that time, now you'll start to understand where the footwork element, because really when you look at FREFLODO, that's the first thing you see is the footwork, right? So I basically, at that point, already working a few years as a trainer, treated myself like the client. It's like, okay, I got to figure this out, because they got me jumping rope. I'm doing the jump rope as a warm up. And for whatever reason, for me, it wasn't translating into the level of footwork that I needed, because I was even seeing things, but I wasn't able to capitalize on what I was seeing. And I was getting caught by things because my body just wasn't functioning the way I needed to avoid being caught by things, right? So I tried all kinds of plyometric drills that I had known, experimented ones, tried to come up with different ones, went back sparring, no change, you know. Because another thing, as you know, being a dance instructor and student for so many years, when you're not working efficiently, you spend a lot of energy. Added to which, you're in a combat situation, so there's already a primal thing that kicks in, survival, right? So you're spending a lot of energy, and I was getting exhausted. I knew I was in great conditioning. I knew that I was in better condition than some of these guys that I was sparring with, but because they had experience in how to manipulate the situation in the ring, that trumped all. Oh man, I even hate to use that word as this description. That negated.
Take back the word. I know, it's horrible.
That's a separate subject, but yeah, that negated everything that I had that at one point was an asset, which was my conditioning. So I was getting tired fast and I was ineffective. It wasn't until one day that I got on a treadmill, and with that, because it would haunt me, I'm very competitive with myself. And it was eating at me that I could be better than what I'm demonstrating, but I just did not know how to change it. And nothing that they were showing me at Kingsway was translating into better footwork for me. So I'm on the treadmill one day, and I'm playing back in my mind like the last sparring session that did not go my way. One of many that didn't go my way. And I remember being trapped, right? Guys throwing jabs, and it's like cutting off the ring, trapping me. And I know intellectually that I need to escape, but mechanically, it just wasn't working. So while I was up there on the treadmill, I turned the speed down a little bit. And I just tried to, in my mind, simulate some movement, i.e. changing and moving laterally, which would be like circling the ring, and then just playing with that. And what clicked was the sensation, because of the moving surface of the treadmill, and obviously having to be in constant motion, otherwise it pushes you off. There was a glide effect that I was feeling when I was moving laterally on the treadmill versus running forward. So without thinking too much about it, but more in just connecting with the feeling of it, which reminds me of a quote, a Bruce Lee quote, when he says, don't think, feel. It's a scene in Enter the Dragon where he hits the student on the head because he asks the kid a question. And he says, let me think. And Bruce Lee smacks him and says, don't think, feel. So it was a feeling that spoke to me, that like woke something up. I couldn't really describe it. It was just a feeling. It was relaxed and it felt like I could do it forever. Went back and sparred. Now, I don't want to go make this some kind of Hollywood story where I went from being ragdolled in the ring to running the gym and I'm the king of the mountain and I was dominated. No, it wasn't like that. But it went from always feeling like I was a half a beat behind to, oh, wait, I just landed on the mark. I missed the next one, but whoa, I just got the next two. Before I was trapped, I just glided out of position and it wasn't even effort. So that revelation translated into what became months and months of me spending 2, 3, 4 hours, any break I had between sessions at Equinox, I was up there on the treadmill, playing with movement, changing direction, turning different speeds. There were times, I don't know if you remember, I would have multiple treadmills going on and I would be gliding up and down, going up and down. I love those down times because it'd be like 13 treadmills on and I would be going all the way up and down like an old school typewriter. For the young people, that's those things that we used to use back in the day. And the more I played with it and went back and sparred, the easier things were getting, the slower everything started to seem, meaning it allowed me to just see more. It got to the point where I was spending less and less time at the boxing gym and more time just on the treadmill because at that point, it was like a mad scientist in the lab obsessed with not knowing what was going on, but I couldn't take my mind off of it. Even when I wasn't doing it, I was thinking about it because it felt so organic. It was unlike, first off, it was nothing that anybody taught me to do. It was nothing that I had ever seen, but it was answering so many questions. Every day I had another question. I would try a different thing and within minutes I would have an answer for that. Then it started to occur to me, it's like, wait a minute, this is going to be valuable for any boxer, any athlete that has to use their legs and have balance in motion. And then I started to think, well, how would I teach this? How would I even communicate this to a client, for example? Well, I started writing stuff down on a pad and I had about maybe 2 or 3 pages of notes at that time, thinking like I had encapsulated what it was about. So I remember speaking with someone about the system and someone was saying, you should probably try to protect that or whatever and all that. So I was like, okay, let me do the extensive work of creating something that I could even submit for a patent, which I ended up doing and ended up getting in securing a patent for the method, not for the design of the platform, but for the method. And what that 3-page or 6-page back and front of notes ended up when I really started to add diagrams to it. And I went and got rubber stamps for the feet. It was like learning dance steps and all these different maneuvers. That exercise expanded into what became a 222-page manual.
Yes.
Yeah. All because I was simply trying to figure out why I was so ineffective at something and how I could use what should be my expertise, because I'm in fitness, and, I should be able to figure this out and just challenging myself to come up with an answer to that. And that led to the development of FREFLODO, leaving personal training and focusing and dedicated exclusively on teaching that, partnering up with Woodway Treadmill to get the launch pads built, because the more I played with it, the more restricted I was starting to feel by the handrails. It's like a caged bird. The bird wants to fly. The more I was playing, the more I wanted to move and expand. And it was just, so in my mind, the thing that made sense for what I was figuring out was something more along the lines of like the platform that we see at the end of the theme song for the Jetsons. Remember when George Jetson says, "Jane, stop this crazy thing," and he's going around and around. I mean, if you look at the launch pad, that's basically what that is, right? It's a treadmill without the display panel with rails, no obstruction. And what was really interesting too is not only understanding that needed to happen prior to partnering up with Woodway for the launch pad. People who I had introduced to FREFLODO on the treadmill had a very different experience than people whose first experience with FREFLODO was on the launch pad. And the reason is, and when I say that, meaning, although the launch pad for most people was very intimidating because there's nothing to hold on to, the upside to their first time experience was because there was nothing to hold on to, they entered into the experience in a completely different mindset. They were fully present. Whereas people who were on the treadmill who had already a prior experience with it, they were on a treadmill, so they were comfortable getting on a treadmill. What was uncomfortable was what I was asking them to do, because as they have experienced being on a treadmill, it was completely contradictory to what they had grown accustomed to. So it took more time to get them out of that mindset of you're moving in a straight line all the time. We're going to change direction. We're going to lead this foot, blah, 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 blah. Whereas people getting on the launch pad for the very first time, I found that they picked up some of the basic introductory elements a lot quicker because of the absence of the safety of the handrails and all that, because of the necessity of the command of their full focus and attention and being completely in the moment. So that was the interesting thing. It's kind of like teaching a kid how to ride a bike with no training wheels versus teaching them how to bike with training wheels, right?
Yeah,
yes,
I learned
the kid
it
without
with
the training wheels is probably going to fall sooner, but they're also going to learn quicker. With the kid with the training wheels,
on the treadmill first.
Sorry?
I was on the treadmill first. Like
so you
I did learn it. I learned it on the treadmills first with 1 or 2 treadmills, going back and forth, hop off, hop on, changing around, dancing, and then I moved to the launch pad.
So as you recall, what do you remember being the key difference going from the 2 different platforms?
This, because there's the safety of the regular, when you have the treadmill and there's those handlebars, you can jump off, or even going off the back wall, the territory. But then in the launch pad, it's like, whoa, it was a totally different thing.
It's all on you.
Yeah, you have to actually stand or do things. And I think probably the people who had already been training with it, you would have been asking more of us than somebody who you're just getting on there. I remember you had a blind woman on there.
Yes. You remember her?
Yeah.
Yes. Diana. Yes, that was wild. You know what was interesting about that time? I've had quite a few experiences in my life where, I'm convinced that God exists, and, I'll debate with anybody till we run out of breath as long as they want to. And it's fine if I can't persuade them to think differently of it. But there have been experiences where I have just conceded and just trust because I am convinced of it. And what was interesting was before I had the pleasure of meeting Diana, who at the time was in her late 70s, I was doing some work on the launch pads, and there was a member, oh God, I forgot her name. She was, one of the regulars, meaning day in, day out, we chat and all that stuff. And she one day came over to me. This was when the launch pads were there now, up on the top floor. And, she was asking me some questions about it. And of course, I was happy to explain everything. She says, I think, sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself on the timeline. Before she approached me, for about a month and a half, 6 weeks, 2 months, I had started to experiment with blindfolds. Do you remember that time, that phase?
Yes.
Yeah. So getting on and getting off and getting on and challenging myself to take a few beats and turn before bailing out, all those things I was just starting to do. That was when that member at Equinox approached me and said, what are you doing? Like, what is that? Not like, are you crazy? Like, what's that about? Intrigued. And because there were quite a few of the other people who were like, oh, that's crazy. I don't know what he's doing, but that's okay. That's normal. And so I explained it to her, and she says, I have a really good friend who I think would love this. Now she's a senior. I don't know, if you work with seniors. I say, yeah, absolutely work with seniors. Yeah, and she's also blind. She said a very matter of fact, she's also blind. When she said that, I got goosebumps because for 6 weeks to 8 weeks, I had been experimenting with being in this dark space on a familiar surface, which doesn't seem that familiar anymore when you remove one of your primary senses. And I was starting to figure some things out. So when she told me that she had a friend who was a senior, who was legally blind, who she thought would be interested in something like this, I was like, absolutely. please make the introduction, bring her in. So she spoke with a friend, tells me her friend would absolutely love to come in. Turns out she's a badass and a master pianist and studied at Juilliard. Phenomenal minds, okay? Walks throughout New York City with no cane. No blind man stick. All right? That's who we're talking about. This is the woman I have the honor of meeting and taking on as a student who was really teaching me. But we all know the students are always teaching the teacher. And man, she came in on a day that I thought we were just going to meet and talk so she could get a vibe from me and then decide from that point if she wanted to come back and train. So I come downstairs, they page me downstairs, I come downstairs. Her boyfriend brought her in and, you know, we start talking and all that stuff. I introduced myself and I explained a bit of my training philosophy and what it entails. And, you know, if this is something you think you'd like to do, at the end of it, I said, I'd be happy to have you come through and take you upstairs. She looks at me, she says, well, faces me. And she says, well, I bought my tennis shoes. I thought we could go today. Done. I think I went over to Joe. I said, listen, Joe, I got a special guest today. And, you know, I need to take her upstairs. Everything was cool. Took her up there, get her on there. And I turned on the launch pads, still with them off, let her feel it with her hands, let her touch it with her feet, up and down the length of it. There were two, as you remember, they were kind of staggered. Yeah. So that one would come off, you would come off this way and the other one, kind of like a yin yang formation. And I let her feel it. I turned on the speed like 0.1 so she could feel the treads of the moving surface so she could understand and feel and be aware of this environment. Man, Laura, that was probably one of the single best experiences I've had in this journey of learning through my interaction with sharing my passion with other people. Because as well as confirmation that God is definitely in the mix, because what inspired me to just do this blindfold work 2 months before having a senior who is blind on the launch pads? I don't believe in coincidences. So we had a wonderful time. In a very short amount of time, she was able to get on, mount, and ride and bail out completely unassisted. I would follow her, have my hand, and as always, she could get on and off completely unassisted. One of the most profound experiences I've had in my profession to date.
Yeah, those are the gifts, aren't they?
Oh my gosh, yes, absolutely. And her own story was phenomenal. She knew Martin Luther King. I mean, we would have some really deep, incredible conversation. That was a real gift, that time with her, for sure.
So that's amazing. And thank you for sharing all of that. Like, yeah, as you said, I feel like I could, like yesterday, like I know exactly in my body what it felt like to be on that machine playing in this really diverse movement realm. Like it was like, and just for a movement junkie, it was like the perfect amusement park moment.
I remember that time with you. I was hooked on that time with you because you came into it as a student of movement, right? So you were already wired for this shit. You were already wired for movement and performance and body control and flexibility, you know, on levels that I don't even understand. So to see you in that environment play, that was, yeah, I mean, there's so many gems along the way. And it just continued to confirm to me the value that it would have for people from all walks of life. And it was also interesting because there were still members who I would talk up and, you know, offer them just an opportunity to experience it, who wouldn't budge. It was like trying to blow air into a closed fist. They would not budge. Even after seeing a senior blind woman on there, so I realized, you know what? That was also part of my growth. People have to do things when they're ready. And if they're not ready, they're not ready. But the show must go on and we got to make this stuff available for the people who are, or at least curious.
Yeah. So tell me what's going on now. What's in your world and life right now? You're on the other coast.
So I'm in on the coast, been out here now, 16 years now.
Holy crap.
This year is 16 since I've been in California. And I still refer to myself as a New Yorker, born and raised, will always be. But I do like the differences, especially in the winter. I've gotten so soft when it comes to winter. I've been back and forth sometimes and visited, and with your body does change. You know what I mean? Your body really does change. It's painful to go back in the winter now for me, but I still miss New York, even though it's changed dramatically. Each time I go there, there's a part of my heart that's kind of like broken a little bit, because it's some of the edginess of New York, I feel, has kind of faded a little bit. And I'm talking pre-pandemic, you know what I mean? But, you know, nothing stays the same forever. But New York, it'll always be home. But yeah, being out in California, it's been a different experience. Being able to train a certain way year round, right? And I came to understand that's why a lot of athletes move, you know, go to these warm climates, because it's way more forgiving on the body than these harsh, cold winters. That was different. The big eye opener when I first landed here was how active people are, and how much the weather seems to influence that. You know, even people who seem deconditioned were at least still walking and, you know, moving about. Whereas, you know, in New York, everyone's jumping in the cab, you know, or taking the train, right? You didn't really see people, even out of shape people, like on a bike for the most part. So you would see that the culture was very, very different. Sometimes to an unhealthy extreme, you know, but you know, it comes with the territory. But yeah, I definitely have enjoyed being out here. Coming out here, of course, for the girls growing up, it was a different experience. And yeah, it's been very cool opening up my own studio, which was the year after I had moved out here. So I moved out here 2005, and it was the spring of the following year that I opened up the space. And that period in between, when I actually wasn't working, that was a tough time. I think I was like the caterpillar in the cocoon waiting to come out, but because it was tough not doing what I love to do, you know, which is working with people and all that stuff. I mean, I was giving sessions away on the beach just to continue and keep sharp and you know, so it was tough. But when I did finally find this space, this little box, this little hole in the wall, it just, because, you know, what I came to realize is you can be in an environment that is either conducive for your growth or not. And yeah, yes,
right. I know exactly. I know all.
You know what I'm talking about.
I do. And at a certain point, you feel your wings starting to go, this little box doesn't fit anymore.
Yeah, right.
Isn't giving me what I need. Yeah.
And if you're true to yourself, you will seek it out, and then your momentum will continue to build. And when I got this space, first thing I did when I secured it was I said a prayer right at the doorway. And because I was already convinced by that point that God was definitely using me in people's lives. And the more I remained true to that and held myself accountable to that, the more powerful the experiences I was having with my clients and they were having with me. So I'd never deviate from that. So I figured, okay, you have this space now. It's going to bear your name. It's going to bear your mark. You say you want to be this medium for God to work through people through you. Well, let's make sure we set the tone. And I said a prayer right there at the doorway. And what was really profound for me was, even to this day, when people come in for the first time, before we even start, a lot of them will say, man, there's a real good energy here. Love that. Love that. So quietly to myself, I'm like, thank you, God, because I'm here because you set me to be here. And when I set it up, I made sure to keep you in the mix. So I believe that how I'm able to be of service to people has everything to do with the fact that I recognize that the talent that I have comes from him, and it's my job to continue to nurture it, which I do every time I work out or play and move. I'm constantly still asking questions, trying to figure out stuff. Whether my client needs it or not, I want to make sure that I have it just in case they need it.
Are the launch pads there? Is anyone?
The launch pads are here. We're still playing on the launch pads. It's evolved so much. And that's part of the joy of it, because like any art form, as a dancer, I'm sure you can attest, there's no ceiling. There is no ceiling. The only ceiling is in your mind. If you want to keep on growing, there's ways for you to keep expanding those wings. They can keep expanding. And not only has that expanded as a method, but it has inspired this next project, which you mentioned is the cones, which is the stumps. I'm not going to get into it too heavy yet because I really want to speak on it when they're available to the public, but I am really close. And Laura, if you enjoyed FREFLODO, you will be blown away by some of the stuff that that this product that will be mass market friendly is going to mean for people in the movement arts, as well as people who have never been involved in PE. At the expense of sounding again cliche, it is a game changer. Because what was challenging and continues to be challenging about FREFLODO is the barrier of entry, which is the launch pad, right? Not everybody either has the space or the funds to put a launch pad in their home. So that's been a challenge. And part of what inspired this product and what's coming up next, which is inspired by FREFLODO, was my desire to make it more accessible, the principles of it and the philosophy of it more accessible to people who would not ordinarily be able to experience, because either they weren't having a personal experience with me or Malik, who had a launch pad, or, you know, I have a client who actually put some in his home, one of his homes. I mean, it was, you know, but to make it accessible to everybody so that everybody could gravitate to it for whatever calls them to it. This next thing is inspired by that, and it is a non-mechanical device, but yeah, there's a lot of goodies packed in this one.
Cool. And so where exactly are you now? Are you in LA or where?
Yeah, I'm here in Santa Monica. I'm speaking to you from the studio right now. Yeah.
So if people want to find you, what is the name of your studio? Is it FREFLODO?
It's actually called FREFLODO at the beginning, but, you know, people can find me on Instagram, Kappel LeRoy Clarke. There is a website, although that website really needs to be updated. So I apologize for how dated it looks, but or they can just hit me up by email, Kappel, my first name, Kappel @freflodo.com, FRE1EFLOD like dog O.com.
Yeah, it's super awesome. Highly recommend. Like,
thank you.
But if you are of gentle persuasion, you might need this to get more fiery and more. And if you are already super fiery, he'll definitely take advantage of that factor. Oh my God! I remember you mean like slaughtered me.
You're fire red here, all over the place on the launch pad. Man, that was a good time.
That was a great time. That was a great time. So let me ask a question. If you were to give advice to anybody, I mean, I feel like you've said so much about passion and all that, but just about embodiment, about what is it to be in a body? What do you feel like the most important ways of perceiving that or thinking about it or dealing with it? What do you feel like the keys to that are?
That's an actually easy one, because I feel like I talk about that every single day with every single session, no matter how many times I work with people, because I believe that what we do, if we are attentive to the opportunity that we have when we're working out, when we're exercising, when we're practicing art forms like dance or martial arts, boxing, and playing an instrument, if you're fully present and connected from your mind to your body and to your spirit, in a literal way, like bringing all of that into everything you do, how you attain the skill is very different than people who approach it from a more superficial standpoint. I can't tell you how many times I've had people come to me saying, yeah, they want to lose this number of pounds, or they'll point to a part of their body, like we can spot fits and all that stuff, right? And although I'm listening intently to what they're saying, I'm actually feeling more for what they're not saying, right? What's really being communicated? When I look at their body language, what's their body telling me? When they're standing up, what am I seeing? When they walk, what am I seeing? When I get them on the launch pad, what am I seeing? And often what I'm seeing has very little to do with the goals that they said that they had. Now, it's not that I'm not paying attention or dismissing why they're here, but usually when we address this, all of those other things are addressed as byproducts of addressing this. You see? So how do I see, the movement is really, or training the body, I see it more as an extension of the mind. And what you can will with your mind, went through time and practice and conditioning and healthy maintenance, you can eventually start to express that through the movements of the body. And that's what I see when I see some of the top performance artists, dancers, athletes doing what they do. I just see people who have spent a certain amount of time in that space, making that connection where they can make something extremely difficult and challenging look effortless, right? Like, there's countless examples, right? Like Michael Jordan in basketball. That's probably one of the most common go-tos when it comes to that, right? Ferocious, but you still got to do the work. You got to put in the time. You got to put in the reps, the repetitions, like what I see you doing with the poll on Instagram. When I laugh, I'm not laughing at you. I'm laughing because I know right here what it means to fall on my ass and be in the pursuit of something. But when I saw that first one, when you fell and you're laughing, that's the magic, because you're laughing because you're playing, you're just having fun. And what you learned in that moment was what you didn't know. And that's part of how you learn. That was a success, because now you know what didn't work, or now you know maybe something that you didn't have and what you might need. There's a gem in that. It shows you what you need to work on. It shows you, it's all being laid out there for you. And the more you are willing to put yourself in that very humble place and end up on your ass, looking up at the ceiling, laughing at yourself, the more of the information that you can now work on. But most people don't want to go there. And it's not that I believe that most people are lazy, although some are. I think most people are so self-conscious. I'm worried about how they're going to look, who's watching me fail, am I humiliating that they never allow themselves to go into that space where the magic happens. And maybe magic is the wrong word, because it's not an illusion. What's happening in that moment is real. Is a real facing yourself, looking at yourself in the mirror like a fork in the road, and it's like, okay, you just fell on your ass. You can either now get back on the pole and be tentative and not really push it for fear of ending up on your back again, or you can take the information that you got right prior to landing on your ass and say, okay, with this, what if I try this? What if I try this? There's 6 different things I could try right now. I'm gonna go through all 6 of them and see. And one of them, it could be the first one, it could be the last one, it could be one in the middle. Something is gonna click. And you owe it to that fall, that landing on your ass, because that created the moment where you had an opportunity to go in a different direction, to continue building this momentum of growth. And that's what I try to do with exercise. It's a push-up. We could just call it a push-up, down, up. I mean, you could go to any YouTube video and get a good workout. But in that moment when someone is struggling and they're thinking that it's purely only about the strength that they have or don't have, if they reach a certain number or don't reach a certain number, to me, that's an opportunity for us to go further. That's an opportunity for us to answer some of those questions. And I've had throughout my career, some people sometimes break down in tears, because in order to go to that place that you and I are talking about, particularly when it's not something that you just voluntarily do because of how you approach life, if this is a new concept for people and you're asking them to pull back some layers, sometimes stuff comes up. And sometimes the stuff that comes up, they aren't even aware that they've been carrying that shit. Right? But it's still affecting and tainting some of their day-to-day experiences without even knowing why. So when they have those moments and they're crying and they're like hysterically and not sure why, feeling embarrassed, a lot of times I'll just put my hand on the shoulder and say, take your time. If you want, I can step out, come back in if you need a moment of privacy, but just take your time. I said, but I always say, breathe through it. And before you leave, I just want to talk to you about it, which is really, I want them to talk to me about it, because something was triggered in that moment. And if all you do is gather yourself, wipe your hair, say, okay, let's continue, let's go, it hasn't gone anywhere. All you did was put it back in the attic, and it's gonna come out again the next time you're challenged. And you're gonna have the same reaction and you're gonna be fair. No, let's take that moment and understand what's going on. Because the way we train in here, we're going to eventually come back to this place. It's just a matter of time. It's not if, it's just when. So we might as well face it head on and see what this is about. What's going on? Sometimes it has something to do with a relationship with the parents. Sometimes it has to do with some trauma that they had as a child or whatever. And we'll talk about it. They'll share it with me, and they know, because it's a safe space. I know more about some stuff about people than their own spouses do. And they'll never know it from me, because I respect that, because that's part of the environment that we create here when we work together. And I respect that. I'll never talk about anybody's personal business here, because that's sacred. That's what allows us to do the work that we're doing, that trust. And because they trust me, and they know that I'm not that trainer who's just acting like a drill sergeant because my sole purpose is to break them down. Now, I'm not trying to break anybody. I'm trying to help rebuild you in a way where you can really go after life in ways that maybe you didn't even you think that you could when you walk through the door. But sometimes in order to achieve that, we have to really peel back the layers and see, like, you go to, so your car is not working right. And if you don't have the skill to do it, you trust a mechanic, you take them in. What's the first thing they do? They lift it up, they take a look, they might drive it around. Oh, I hear this, I know what this is. That's what we do. I'll take them through the thing. I literally put them on the lift and let's see what we need to work on. And that will be the focus. Even if what they told me was, well, I want to lose 10 pounds. It's not just going to be 10. It might be 10 pounds of body weight, but it's going to be about 100 pounds of that other weight that you've been carrying around that you didn't realize you were carrying. We're going to get rid of that shit.
You're holding on to. Yeah. Yeah, that's amazing. And you totally named all the things in there. Like, it is like, that's the body journey, the body, mind, heart journey, the spirit journey, the whole thing. And when we can work with it all together, and it's always going to be all together, whether you're acknowledging it or not. It's all there. So if you have these moments of coming up, and with those poll videos, like, one reason I like to post, I mean, I post my successes, but I also post my failures. I'm trying to post the journey, because I'm 51 and I'm like, I started a year and a half ago. And
we're the same age.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's like, people need what you said before about what's the model. Like, we need to make our reality, because I don't think there are so many great models of people who've aged in a way that I think is skillful and integral. Like, that is, I am what I am. Of course, my hair is pink. I was born this way. Like, it's the one thing, it's total lie. Yeah.
I like how
the rest of me is me.
It used to be a little bit more red, but it definitely became pink.
It's much more pink, but I actually have to run, because I'm actually part of this whole embodiment reconnection week, and I'm hosting that tonight. But I just have to say how much I have totally adored listening to you and getting to hear your journey and your inspiration and just what you do with people, because I know it's magical. Like, my experience with you is magical, and just having seen each other, along the way over the years, and you're very, very generous. You're very generous.
Same with you. And one of the things, and I have to say this for the other people watching who know you or are just seeing you for the first time. And one of the things that I get a joy of every time a post of yours comes up in my feed, Instagram feed, is that, the last time you and I played together on Launchpad was at least 16 years ago, right? At least, if not longer. And I look at you, first off, you're an ageless wonder, because you look the same. The joy in your face, how animated you are when you speak, that hasn't changed a bit. And I attribute that because I've observed people far older than us who still have a youthful thing about them. And I have always, even since a kid, I've always engaged seniors. I wasn't one of those people who's like, oh, I don't want to talk to an old person because they're going to talk my ears off. I was just wired that way. And one of the things that I have seen, the common denominator between the 80-year-old who looks and moves like someone who's still decades younger versus an 80-year-old who looks like they got one foot in the grave, is that they are connected to their passion. Whether the passion is movement oriented, whether the passion is playing music, whatever their passion is, as long as they stay connected with it, they age differently. How fortunate you and I are that our passion has to do with our bodies. So the body is also benefiting by something that's already happening very organically, which is us just simply staying connected to that light. And everybody has it. It's why it's so important to find it. Don't just settle for the high paying job, because eventually you'll realize sooner or later that it doesn't fulfill you, even after 2, 3, 4 houses. As many of my clients throughout the years, I've seen those people and worked with those people. Money doesn't get it all. But in any case.
Yeah, sorry, my thing is.
Yeah, you gotta go. I know you gotta go.
They are there, but such a pleasure. And I'm just going to close the whole thing out. And it's such a joy to see you, Kappel.
Thank you.
Kappel LeRoy Clarke. Kappel LeRoy Clarke.
Yes, thank you. Yes, great seeing you. Great talking to you. Thank you for allowing me to be a part of this.
My pleasure.
Take care.
You too.